right now. While you're watching this, something is happening that most people won't understand until it's too late. The Epstein documents aren't just about one man or one scandal. They're a digital wildfire burning through foundations of global power structures, and the smoke signals point to something we haven't seen since 1939. I'm not talking about political drama or conspiracy theories. I'm talking about 6 distinct stages of societal collapse that always, without exception, precede major global conflict. And we're currently in stage 4, drop prepared or unprepared in the comments right now, because what you learn in the next 30 minutes will determine which category you actually fall into. Most people think they know what's coming. They don't, and that ignorance will cost them everything. Let me show you something that should terrify you. In the 72 hours after the latest document release, 3 things happened simultaneously. First, major financial institutions quietly moved assets to decentralized holdings. Second, military contractors received the largest combined contract allocations in peacetime history. Third, 14 countries accelerated their strategic grain reserve purchases by margins that defy normal market behavior. These aren't coincidences. These are the fingerprints of people who know something you don't. Yet, you see, the Epstein situation isn't the story. It's the match. What matters is the gasoline that's been pooling underneath global stability for decades, and why the people who allegedly knew about that situation for years are now watching their blackmail infrastructure collapse in real time. When powerful people lose their leverage mechanisms, they don't retire quietly. They escalate. And escalation between nuclear powers follows a very predictable pattern that we're going to break down in brutal detail. Here's what nobody is connecting. Every single major war in modern history was preceded by the exposure of elite criminal networks. I'm not theorizing. The historical pattern is absolute. Before World War I, the exposure of European royal family interconnections and their role in Balkan destabilization. Before World War II, the revelation of international banking coordination that funded both sides of previous conflicts. Before every regional conflict that expanded into something larger, there was a moment when the people realized the systems protecting them were actually predators wearing badges. That moment causes a trust collapse. And trust collapse in nuclear-armed societies create a vacuum that gets filled with violence. The 6 stages I'm about to walk you through aren't predictions. They're observations. Pattern recognition based on historical precedent, current geopolitical positioning, and the behavioral psychology of powerful people facing accountability. Understanding these stages won't prevent what's coming, but it will give you a map while everyone else wanders blind. And in crisis, having a map is the difference between your family eating and your family starving. Stage 1 is information release and institutional defense. We're past this. The documents are out. The mainstream response has been either complete silence or aggressive deflection. Notice how the conversation always pivots away from the content of the allegations and toward attacking the messengers? That's not accidental. That's crisis management protocol for intelligence-connected scandals. When institutions defend the indefensible, populations fracture. Half believe the institutions. Half don't. That fracture is the crack in the dam. Stage 2 is economic instability masked as normal market fluctuation. We're past this too. Look at your grocery bill. Look at fuel costs. Look at housing prices. Now look at the official inflation numbers. They don't match, do they? That's because there are 2 economies now. The one you're told about and the one you're living in. The people at the top of these alleged networks, they operate in the real economy. They've been hedging against collapse since before you knew anything was wrong. The wealth transfer happening right now isn't an accident. It's a deliberate consolidation before the chaos, because assets acquired during collapse are acquired at pennies on the dollar. Ask yourself, why would BlackRock and Vanguard be buying residential homes at 20 to 30% above market value in 2021 and 2022? Because they knew housing would become the next scarce resource. They knew currency would devalue. They prepared. Did you? Stage 3 is political polarization reaching violence thresholds. We're in this now. I don't care which side you're on. What I care about is you recognizing that both sides are being pushed toward conflict by forces that benefit from your distraction. The Epstein documents reveal alleged coordination between intelligence agencies, corporate powers, and political figures across multiple nations. If that's true, even partially, it means the conflicts you think are organic grassroots movements are actually orchestrated. You're not fighting your neighbor. You're both fighting invisible puppeteers. But you'll never win that fight if you're too busy attacking each other. Here's where it gets personal. How many of you have had conversations in the last year that ended friendships? How many families don't talk anymore because of political differences? Comment with a simple number. Just a count. I'll wait. That number isn't random. That's stage 3 operational success. When societies can't have conversations, they have wars instead. And we've been systematically trained to be unable to converse with anyone who disagrees with us. That training wasn't accidental. Stage for selective accountability and scapegoating. This is where we are right now. Watch carefully. Some names from those documents will be destroyed. Others will walk away untouched. The selection process isn't about guilt or innocence. It's about utility and liability. The people who get burned are the ones who no longer serve the system or who know too much. The ones who walk are the ones still useful or too dangerous to expose. What this creates is a perception of justice without actual accountability. And when populations realize they've been given theater instead of trials, the anger doesn't dissipate. It metastasizes. But stage 4 does something else that most people miss. It reveals the protection structures. When you see who doesn't get touched, you're seeing the real power map. Intelligence agencies, multinational corporations with government contracts, political figures from both sides who mysteriously avoid scrutiny. These aren't coincidences. These are the actual command structure. And they're about to make a move that most people won't see coming until it's too late. Which brings us to stage 5. Stage 5 is the one that should keep you awake at night. It's external threat manufacturing. Right now, as these documents circulate and domestic populations start asking uncomfortable questions about their leadership, watch what happens internationally. Tensions with strategic rivals will escalate, not because of genuine conflict, but because nothing unites a fractured population like a common enemy. It's the oldest play in the book, and it works every single time because we never learn. Here's what keeps me up at night. The people allegedly connected to these networks aren't stupid. They're not panicking. They're executing a plan. And part of that plan involves accepting that some level of global conflict is preferable to complete exposure and accountability. Think about that calculus. They're choosing potential war over certain prosecution. What does that tell you about what they think is in those documents? What does it tell you about their assessment of what happens to them if peaceful accountability actually occurs? If you understood that you're smarter than 95% of people who think this is just political theater, but can you explain why that choice makes strategic sense from their perspective? Comment your answer. I reply to the most accurate ones because the people who understand incentive structures are the ones who will navigate this successfully. Stage 6 is where theory becomes reality. Systemic collapse and conflict initiation isn't one event. It's a cascade. It starts with a triggering incident that will seem small in the moment, an assassination, a border clash, a terrorist attack, a currency collapse in a strategic economy, something that creates a 72-hour window where decisions get made under pressure without full information. In that window, the people who've been gaming this out for years will implement pre-planned responses that escalate rather than de-escalate, not because escalation is smart, but because it serves their interests better than the alternative. You'll know it's happening when multiple things go wrong simultaneously in ways that feel coordinated. Power grid failures, bank holidays, emergency declarations, supply chain shutdowns blamed on security concerns, communication disruptions. These won't be announced as, "We're implementing martial law." They'll be framed as temporary emergency measures for your safety. And most people will comply because the alternative feels more dangerous. That compliance is a trap, because temporary measures become permanent when nobody pushes back. And pushing back becomes impossible once the infrastructure for control is fully implemented. Remember earlier when I mentioned those 3 things that happened in 72 hours after document releases? Financial institutions moving assets, military contracts, grain reserves? That wasn't random. Those are the fingerprints of people positioning for stage 6. They're not waiting to see if it happens. They know it's happening. They're just making sure they're on the winning side when it does. But here's where this gets personal for you. The elites have bunkers in New Zealand. They have private security. They have resources you can't even imagine. You don't. What you have is advanced knowledge. You have pattern recognition. You have time to prepare that most people are wasting on denial and distraction. That's your only advantage. And it's enough if you use it correctly. Most preppers focus on the wrong things. They stockpile food and ammunition and think they're ready. They're not, because stage 6 collapse isn't about surviving in isolation. It's about maintaining capability during system disruption. The question isn't whether you have 6 months of food. The question is whether you can still generate income when digital payment systems fail. Whether you have skills people need when credential systems don't matter anymore. Whether you have community relationships that function when institutional authority breaks down. Let me ground this in something practical. Medical supplies. Right now, you can walk into a pharmacy and buy first aid supplies, antibiotics if prescribed, over-the-counter medications. In stage 6, that ends, not because supplies disappear immediately, but because distribution systems fail and hoarding begins. Within weeks, basic medical supplies become worth more than cash. A bottle of broad-spectrum antibiotics becomes tradable for a month's worth of food. An inhaler for an asthmatic family member becomes priceless because you can't manufacture at home. What are you doing right now to stockpile medical supplies? Not paranoid quantities, practical quantities. 3-month supply of any prescription medications you or your family need. Comprehensive first aid, including trauma supplies, not just Band-Aids. Water purification capability, because municipal systems fail when power grids go down. Electrolyte replacement for diarrheal illness, because cholera and dysentery become real threats when sanitation systems stop working. This isn't doomsday prepping. This is basic risk mitigation based on historical precedent from every major conflict and collapse in modern history. You know what nobody talks about? Dental health. In collapse scenarios, a tooth infection can kill you. Antibiotics help, but prevention matters more. Stockpile toothpaste, floss, and if you can find them, temporary filling kits. It sounds insane until you're 3 months into a grid-down scenario and you crack a molar and have no access to a dentist. Then it's the difference between manageable discomfort and life-threatening sepsis. The items I'm covering aren't random. Each one addresses a specific failure mode in stage 6 collapse. But each one only works if you implement it before the crisis, not during. During is too late. During means you're competing with millions of other people who suddenly realize the same thing you did. And in that competition, only the people who prepared in advance survive. Here's the thing about the Epstein documents that connects to all of this. They reveal alleged coordination between intelligence agencies and private networks. If that coordination exists, it means the systems you trust to protect you during crisis are actually the systems that benefit from crisis. Police aren't coming to help you. Military isn't coming to rescue you. Government isn't coming to save you because they're the ones implementing stage 6. You're on your own, and accepting that reality now, while you can still prepare, is the difference between victimhood and survival. Now let's talk about something that makes most people uncomfortable. Stage 5 isn't just about international tensions. It's about identifying who the designated enemies are going to be, both external and internal, because every major conflict requires an other to blame. And in this case, the others are being carefully selected based on who threatens the existing power structure most. Externally, we're seeing the obvious candidates. China, Russia, Iran. These aren't random selections. These are countries that have been systematically building alternative economic systems that threaten dollar hegemony. The petrodollar system that's maintained U.S. economic dominance since the 1970s is under direct assault from BRICS nations creating alternative settlement mechanisms. When your power is based on controlling the global reserve currency, and that control is being actively challenged, you have 3 options: adapt, negotiate, or destroy the competition. The people allegedly running these networks aren't the adapting type. Look at the timing. Within weeks of major document releases, you'll see military posturing increase. Naval exercises, in contested waters. Airspace violations that would normally be routine suddenly become international incidents. Sanctions announced with dramatic rhetoric. Alliances shifting in ways that seem random until you map them against who's named in those documents and which countries have extradition treaties. Then the pattern becomes obvious. The countries playing aggressive aren't coincidentally the ones whose leadership has the least exposure in these files. Think about that. Pause here. We've covered 2 complete stages and touched 3 more. Most people quit right here, right before the real secrets. Comment, still here, if you're committed to finishing. Stage 6 is worth more than everything combined, but you need the foundation first, or you won't understand why what's coming is inevitable. Here's what the history books won't tell you. World War I didn't start because of an assassination. That was the excuse. It started because European power structures needed a reset button on economic systems that were collapsing under the weight of corruption and inequality. The war was the solution. World War II didn't start because of ideology. It started because the economic devastation from the First War created conditions where populations would accept authoritarian promises of stability. The ideology was the marketing. The underlying cause was economic desperation, weaponized by people who needed conflict to consolidate power. Every major war follows this pattern. Economic instability plus elite corruption, exposure plus manufactured external threat equals population willingness to sacrifice for conflict. We're seeing all 3 variables align right now. The Epstein documents are the corruption exposure. The inflation crisis nobody wants to call a depression is the economic instability. And if you're paying attention to international news beyond the sanitized mainstream coverage, you're seeing the external threat being carefully constructed in real time. Stage 6 is the one nobody wants to talk about because acknowledging it means accepting we're already past the point of prevention. Stage 6 is systemic collapse and conflict initiation. Not if, when. The question isn't whether this happens. The question is what you do in the time between now and then. And that's what separates the prepared from the casualties. Most people hear this and think I'm being dramatic. Let me ground this in something concrete. Supply chains. Boring, right? Here's what's not boring. 90% of pharmaceutical manufacturing happens in China. 70% of rare earth minerals critical for military and technological applications are controlled by China. 40% of global grain exports come from Ukraine and Russia. Now ask yourself what happens if any of those supply lines get disrupted in a major conflict. You don't get your medications. Your technology stops working when components fail. Your grocery store is empty in 72 hours because modern logistics operates on just-in-time delivery with 0 buffer stock. The elites connected to these alleged networks? They've been preparing for this for years. They have stockpiles. They have backup systems. They have contingency plans built by people whose only job is thinking about worst-case scenarios. You don't. Not because you're stupid, but because you've been systematically kept ignorant about the fragility of everything you depend on. That's intentional. Prepared populations are harder to control. Desperate populations will accept anything in exchange for safety. Real talk. How many of you have more than 2 weeks of food stored right now? Drop yes if you do. No judgment if you don't. But understand that 2 weeks is the absolute minimum for weathering even a minor supply disruption. We're talking about potential major conflict. You need to be thinking in terms of months, not days. And most people won't do it because it feels crazy right up until the moment it becomes desperately necessary. By then, the stores are empty and the prices are astronomical. What I'm about to say will anger a lot of comfortable people. If you're ready for uncomfortable truth, smash the like button now. The Epstein documents reveal that the people you've trusted protect society have allegedly been participating in or covering up activities that destroy it. That's not political. That's not partisan. That's just the alleged facts in the files. When those people lose control of the narrative, they don't resign and apologize. They create bigger distractions. And the biggest distraction available to people with control over military and economic systems is war. You think I'm exaggerating? Let me walk you through the timeline. Late 2019, early pandemic warnings emerge. Within months, complete economic shutdown of Western societies for the first time in modern history. Largest wealth transfer from middle class to elite class ever recorded. small businesses destroyed, corporate chains consolidated, then inflation that officially doesn't exist but functionally destroys purchasing power, then supply chain failures blamed on everything except deliberate policy choices, then energy crises in Europe that were entirely predictable based on policy decisions made years earlier, then strategic grain shortages, then escalating military tensions. This isn't a series of unfortunate events. This is a sequence, and we're approaching the final stage of that sequence. The 6 stages aren't separate. They're cumulative. Each one builds pressure that makes the next one more likely. We're in stage 4 heading into stage 5. Stage 6 is a release valve. And when that valve opens, everything changes. Not gradually, overnight. The world you woke up in will not be the world you go to sleep in. And most people will be completely blindsided because they refuse to see the pattern until it was too late. Coming up, I'm going to break down exactly what stages 5 and 6 look like in practical terms. And more importantly, what you can do right now to position yourself and your family for survival. Skip ahead, and you'll miss why context matters. Drop me if you're impatient, but understand the why is what separates survivors from victims. Let's go deeper into stage 5, because this is where most people's normalcy bias kicks in and prevents them from seeing what's right in front of them. External threat manufacturing doesn't mean the threats aren't real. It means they're amplified, timed, and weaponized for domestic control. The difference matters. A genuine geopolitical conflict emerges from competing interests and failed diplomacy. A manufactured conflict emerges from deliberate policy choices designed to create confrontation when distraction is needed most. Watch what happens in the next 6 months. Every time there's a major revelation from document releases or investigations that threaten powerful people, you'll see a corresponding international incident within 72 hours. It's not magic. It's media management and strategic timing. The goal isn't to start World War III tomorrow. The goal is to keep you afraid of external enemies, so you stop asking questions about internal corruption. But there's a problem with that strategy. Eventually, you run out of runway. Eventually, the manufactured tensions become real ones because other powers start responding to the provocations. And once that feedback loop begins, it becomes impossible to control. But the internal enemies are more interesting and more dangerous to you personally. In every historical parallel, domestic scapegoats get selected for blame. In pre-World War I, it was ethnic minorities and political dissidents. In pre-World War II, you know the history. In modern pre-conflict scenarios, it's going to be anyone who questions a narrative. Preppers, alternative media consumers, people who stockpile food and supplies, people who distrust institutions, people who want accountability for the alleged crimes in those documents. You're going to be labeled a threat, not because you've done anything wrong, but because prepared, informed, questioning citizens are incompatible with the level of control required for Stage 6 implementation. They need compliance. You represent resistance simply by being self-sufficient, and self-sufficient people can be controlled through fear and dependency. That makes you dangerous to them, which makes them dangerous to you. This is already starting. Pay attention to how misinformation gets defined. It's not false information anymore. It's information that contradicts official narratives. Even when that information is factually accurate, the people who share it aren't wrong. They're dangerous. This linguistic shift is deliberate. It's groundwork for later justification of restrictions. When Stage 6 initiates, those restrictions become actionable. Social credit systems, travel restrictions, financial deplatforming. These aren't conspiracy theories. These are systems already implemented in various forms across multiple countries. The question is when, not if, they get deployed more widely. Real talk, how many of you have felt increasingly uncomfortable expressing your actual opinions publicly? Drop me in comments. You're not alone. That discomfort is the goal. Self-censorship is more effective than institutional censorship because it's internalized. You stop sharing information. You stop asking questions. You comply without force being necessary. That compliance makes Stage 6 implementation frictionless. They don't have to fight you. You've already surrendered. But self-sufficient communities are the antidote. Not bunkers. Not isolation. Networks. The people who survive Stage 6 collapses throughout history aren't lone wolves. They're connected communities with diverse skills, shared resources, and mutual trust. Start building those relationships now, not with everyone. With people who demonstrate reliability, capability, and shared values. Those relationships become more valuable than gold when systems fail. Because you can't eat gold, but you can trade skills and goods with trusted partners. Let me give you a practical framework. Identify 5 families or individuals in your geographic area who have complementary skills: medical knowledge, mechanical ability, farming or gardening experience, construction capability, security background. Don't approach them with "let's prep for doomsday." Approach them with "let's build community resilience." Help each other with projects now. Share resources. Create trust through action before crisis demands it. When Stage 6 hits, you'll have a network that functions because it's already functional, not a fantasy that collapses under stress. What I'm about to say will anger comfortable people. The Epstein documents reveal that the systems protecting us have allegedly been corrupted at the highest levels for decades. If you still trust those systems to protect you during crisis, you're not prepared. You're delusional. And that delusion will get you killed. Not because I want it to, but because reality doesn't care about your comfort or your preferences. Reality responds to preparation and capability. Nothing else. Let me ground this in economics because that's where Stage 6 becomes undeniable. Currency collapse isn't dramatic. It's gradual until it's sudden. You've been experiencing gradual for 3 years. Your purchasing power has been eroded by 20 or 40% depending on how honestly you assess actual price increases versus official inflation numbers. That's a gradual phase. The sudden phase happens when confidence breaks. Not in the currency itself, but in the institutions managing it. When people realize the Federal Reserve isn't independent but captured, when they understand that monetary policy serves elite interests rather than public welfare, when they see that the people allegedly involved in these networks are the same ones making economic decisions, confidence evaporates. And when confidence in currency evaporates, you get hyperinflation or currency collapse. Not over years, over weeks. We've seen it happen in Weimar Germany, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, Argentina, Lebanon. It's not theoretical. It's a historical pattern. And we're following that pattern exactly. What does that mean for you practically? Get out of pure cash positions. Not completely. You need working capital. But holding significant wealth in currency that's being systematically devalued is financial suicide. Tangible assets. Property if you can afford it, but not in cities. Land in rural areas with water access and agricultural potential. Precious metals, but not as investment, as insurance. Tools and equipment that maintain value, because utility doesn't inflate. Skills development that can't be taken from you and becomes more valuable when credentialing systems fail. Most importantly, debt management. If you're carrying high-interest consumer debt right now, you're voluntarily enslaving yourself during the period when freedom will matter most. Eliminate it, aggressively, because in Stage 6 scenarios, debt becomes weaponized. Social credit systems tie financial access to compliance. If you're dependent on credit to survive, you'll comply with anything to maintain access. If you're debt-free, you have options. Options are freedom, and freedom is what they're trying to eliminate. Here's what nobody wants to hear. The time to prepare ended 2 years ago. We're past the comfortable preparation window. We're in the urgent preparation window. And the urgent window closes the moment Stage 6 initiates. After that, you're in crisis response mode, not preparation mode. And crisis response is exponentially more difficult and dangerous. Every day you delay is a day you're gambling that this won't happen or won't happen yet. That's a bet you can't afford to lose. Let me bring this full circle. The Epstein documents aren't about one man's alleged crimes. They're about a systemic revelation that the people controlling global power structures have been compromised, corrupted, or complicit for decades. That revelation destroys the social contract. When populations realize the systems built to protect them have been predating on them, trust collapses. And trust collapse in nuclear-armed societies creates conditions for major conflict. Not because people want war, but because powerful people prefer war to accountability. The 6 stages aren't predictions. They're the map. Stage 1, Information release happened. Stage 2, economic instability, is here. Stage 3, political polarization, is escalating. Stage 4, selective accountability, is playing out right now as you watch certain names burn while others walk free. Stage 5, external threat manufacturing, is ramping up in real time. Stage 6, systemic collapse and conflict initiation, is coming. The only question is your preparation level when it arrives. You now know more than 99% of people. That's your advantage. But knowledge without action is just entertainment. And this isn't entertainment. This is the most important thing you'll hear this year. What you do in the next 90 days will determine whether your family survives what's coming or becomes a casualty statistic in a history book that won't even tell the truth about why it happened. Honest question. What's the one action you're taking this week to prepare? Comment below. I read every single one. Don't say nothing because you're paralyzed. Say food storage or medical supplies or debt reduction or building community. Pick one thing. Do it. Then come back and pick another. Think I'm wrong about the timeline or the severity. Good. Drop your alternative analysis. Best comment gets pinned and a detailed response. I want to be wrong. Prove me wrong with data and historical precedent. I'll be grateful if you can. If this change how you see what's happening, you need to see what's coming next. Hit subscribe. Smash that bell. Your family's survival depends on staying ahead of this curve. Next video breaks down the specific timeline markers that signal stage 6 initiation is imminent. You'll want that information before it becomes obvious to everyone else. If this saved you from catastrophic unpreparedness, share it with one person who needs this. Not for me, for them. They'll thank you when it matters. Stay informed, stay prepared, or stay a victim. Your choice. One more thing. 99% leave before this. The 1% who stay get the hidden knowledge. The single most important preparation item that combines every principle we discussed into one actionable step. If you're still here, you're the 1%. It's this. Build a 45-day food supply, 15-day water supply, comprehensive medical kit, and a network of 5 trusted families before June 2026. That's your deadline. That's the window. After that, the curve steepens beyond your ability to catch up. Mark it. Execute it. Survive what's coming. Comment survivor if you found this. Welcome to the 1%.